We're continuing talking about the Qiblah in the book of prayer, level 3. And now we're under this subheading. It is permissible to pray without facing the Kaaba in two cases. One, for an optional prayer, even prostration for thanks or recitation. When lawfully traveling, not in a vehicle or a compartment. When traveling, not in a vehicle or a compartment, except the skipper when needed, uh, with more parameters. We'll see. So it's permissible to pray without facing the Kaaba for an optional prayer, even prostration for thanks or recitation. Prostrating for thanks or for recitation without facing the Kaaba. When when lawfully traveling, not sinfully traveling. But don't forget, you can repent in the middle of your journey and then be traveling lawfully. And also, let there be clarity about the case of a woman traveling without a scarf. Let's not say if a woman travels with her head uncovered, then she's sinful. She does not have the permissions of a traveler. Rather, let's just say if she's sinful for traveling, then she won't have the permissions of a traveler. It's possible that she could travel without her head covered. It's possible. Like if she has her own personal transportation. What if she has her personal transportation and she's able to move from one point to another point with her head uncovered, but without being sinful? So it is permissible to pray without facing the Kaaba in two cases. So the first case is an optional prayer, not obligatory prayer, when lawfully traveling, not in a vehicle or a compartment. If traveling in a vehicle or a compartment, then you have to face the Kaaba for your prayer. So then, how would it be if traveling in a vehicle or in a compartment? Compartment means like a cockpit. How would one be traveling if it's not going to be in a vehicle or a compartment? Because it might be traveling on the back of an animal, or it might be traveling on foot. So what doesn't apply here is traveling in a vehicle, like your car or an airplane, or traveling in a compartment, like you have a box on the top of the camel, or you have a seat or a box on top of the elephant. Except the skipper when needed. The skipper is the one who steers the vessel. When that's needed, then the skipper is allowed to pray without facing the pray optional prayer without facing the Kaaba while in a vehicle or compartment. Who could possibly pray an optional prayer not facing the Kaaba while in a vehicle or a compartment? The skipper, because he's the one who's steering the vessel. Yani, the skipper is the one who's steering the vessel for other people, not you driving your own car to a particular destination. Traveling to a particular destination. And the meaning here of traveling to a particular destination is traveling a long journey deliberately. Deliberately traveling a long journey. And this doesn't mean you have to make an intention to travel. This does not mean you have to have an intention to travel. Meaning, you don't have to say, now I intend to travel. Rather, it's enough for you to be a traveler, to have the permissions of a traveler. But it has to be a long travel. Wait, to a particular does not have to be a long travel. I caught myself. To a particular destination basically means you're not a wanderer. You're not a wanderer, but doesn't mean you have to know exactly the town you're going to. Like you might know the country you're going to, but or you might know the district you're going to. Doesn't mean you know the exact house you're going to, or that you know the exact block you're going to. It doesn't mean you know exactly where you're going to pitch your tent, for example. That's not intended by having a particular destination. But not being a wanderer, though. So you could be on a journey going somewhere to a country, but not sure exactly where you're going to settle there, but just sure that you're going to this country or to this land, even without a particular route. Even without a particular route. Yani, he doesn't need a particular route to have this permission during his journey. And even less than a shortening distance. Yani, it could be a short trip. Doesn't have to be a long journey. And this turning away from the Kaaba is for some parts of the prayer when walking, not all parts of the prayer when walking, or all parts of the prayer when riding an animal's back, except facing the Qiblah for the opening takbir if that is easy for the rider. Meaning, the rider, he can turn away from his Qiblah, from the Kaaba, he can turn away from the Kaaba for his entire prayer, except if it's easy for him to face the Qiblah to say Allahu Akbar, then he just has to do that. Face the Qibla to say Allahu Akbar and then turn his animal into the direction of his destination, and then he can pray in the direction of his destination, an optional prayer. After that, the rider turns toward his destination, which then becomes his Qibla. So deviating from it, from the direction of your destination, deviating from that, not forgetfully, so on purpose, nor taken off course by your animal. It's not that your animal took you off course and then resetting immediately. This is invalid because there's no need for it. But if you went off course forgetfully, or because your animal took you off course and then you reset immediately, then your prayer remains valid. So then, how do you pray like this? If you're on foot as a traveler, then one recites the Quran, he stands erect, and he says the tashahhud towards his destination. But he bows and he prostrates and he sits between prostrations towards the Qiblah. So on foot, one recites Quran, stands erect, and says the tashahhud towards his destination. But he bows and he prostrates and he sits between the two prostrations towards the original Qiblah. When riding, but not if the animal is still. So riding while the animal is in motion. So when riding, but not if the animal is still, one bends over to bow and does so more to prostrate, so to tell the difference between his bowing and his prostrating, without having to put his forehead on the saddle, and without having to put his forehead on the back of the animal's neck, on the mane. Because Al-Bukhari reported that the Prophet ﷺ used to pray the optional prayers in the direction of his destination while journeying on an animal. He says his takbir sitting on the animal. Yani, yeah, he says his takbir sitting on the animal. We're not saying here he's not sitting on his animal. And then he turns face Qibla, standing on his feet. Then he turns towards the Qibla with his animal. Then he hops on his animal's back. So, unless I missed something, that's the meaning of your question. So we're not saying that. So that's it. When he's on foot, then he prays the way we just described. And when he's riding, not in a vehicle or a compartment, then he prays the way that we just described. And the second reason for one to pray without facing the Qibla is for being on high alert or red alert. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. So for being on high alert without being restricted to inability to withdraw from unprohibited hand-to-hand combat. Being on high alert, red alert, yani, very afraid if you want. without being restricted to the inability to withdraw from unprohibited hand-to-hand combat. So to include fighting Muslim transgressors and waylayers. Okay. Someone might say, for being on high alert, you can turn away from the Qibla. So we'll say yes. So someone might say, is that restricted to not being able to withdraw? Is that because you can't withdraw? You're unable to withdraw? Is it restricted to that? Is it a condition that you can't withdraw to be able to pray in this way? The answer is no, it's not a condition. It's not a condition that you can't withdraw to be able to pray in this way. Without being restricted to inability to withdraw from unprohibited hand-to-hand combat. Unprohibited, meaning permissible. Permissible hand-to-hand combat. So to include fighting Muslim transgressors and waylayers, Muslims. Or you can pray like this because of being unable to withstand an ambush. Meaning, uh, had there had you been expecting an ambush, so you need to pray, then you're able to pray without facing the Qibla here. Yani, it's not a condition to pray in this way that you are right now fighting. Right now, everybody's fighting everywhere. It's not a condition. Could be before that, because you might be just afraid of the ambush, so you can't pray in Jama'ah prayer. Removing the condition of facing the Qibla for any part of the prayer is necessary, but not advancing or delaying the prayer time. We're talking about here while you're on red alert. Someone might say, this is a dangerous situation. Are we allowed to pray early or late, like when we travel? The answer is no. We can't pray early or late while we in jihad. That's right. War is not a permission to pray early or late. Isn't war more dangerous than traveling? Yeah, but still, Allah knows best. This is how the rules came. Rather, the rules, the religion allowed for us in this case, yani we have to pray on time, but allowed for us not to have to face the Qibla. So removing the condition of facing the Qibla for any part of the prayer is necessary when it comes to this high alert and hand-to-hand combat and anticipating an ambush. Not advancing and delaying the prayer time, though. When one does not anticipate a break so he can get away within the prayer's time span, a break within the prayer's time span, and he is unable to bow or prostrate because, for example, there's hand-to-hand combat everywhere, then he replaces them with a gesture. He replaces his bowing with a gesture and his prostrating with a gesture, with his gesture for prostration being lower than that of bowing, like we talked about. It is obligatory to refrain from screaming in all cases. Also here, this one who's praying and yani, it's chaos everywhere. Everyone's fighting all over the place. Can't gather for Jama'ah prayer. Can't say, time out, let me pray, let me face the Qibla. Time out, hold on. So you're allowed to not face the Qibla, but you have to pray on time, and also you cannot scream because there's no need for it. If one needed to perform many moves to fight, including consecutive strikes and stabs, he does so, and it does not invalidate the prayer according to what is correct. In this case, Yani, because of his dangerous situation. Now, if you're praying in safety, you're not going to be throwing kicks and throwing punches. You're not going to be practicing some kung fu form inside of your prayer. If he could not access either purifier, yani that's water and soil. So going on from here, if I say, what are the purifiers? What are the two purifiers? You should say to me, water and soil. If you're taking notes, then write that down. The two purifiers are water and soil. If one could not access either purifier, then he prays as he is now, with no wudu, no tayammum, and then he repeats. If his weapon becomes bloody, he tosses it for prayer if able. If his weapon becomes bloody, then he tosses it for prayer if he's able to toss it. Or else he keeps it, this bloody weapon, while he's praying, but then he repeats his prayer later. So don't forget, there's a number of cases where you're going to pray on time and then still have to pray later. Repeat your prayer later. And we're going to call that a repeated prayer, or a remade prayer. Not a make-up prayer. They may not even pray in congregation. And neither a follower's prayer nor congregation is invalidated if you needed to step ahead of the imam. In this case, if you were in a jama'ah prayer and then you needed to step ahead of the imam, then you can do so. It won't invalidate your prayer. Wallahu a'lam. Let's stop there. We'll have a short lesson for today.